Okay, yeah, so I'd like to ask some questions because I've been noticing that although I'm working away, struggling to follow what you're saying locally,
Yes.
I don't spend enough time thinking about the global picture to understand what you're actually doing all this stuff for. Sometimes I sort of half feel I understand that, but not.
Yeah, I certainly feel like I'm not conveying the global picture anywhere near sufficiently a lot of time. Go ahead.
So we're gonna try some new thing here where I try to figure that out.
Okay.
But mainly ask you a bunch of questions, but I gotta sort of get a running start. So so I'll start by saying some stuff that hopefully is accurate and hopefully not at all surprising to Jim. If it's the extent to which it's surprising, it's probably inaccurate. So
should I try to put your whiteboard on my screen where I can mark it up if desired?
don't worry about it.
Not yet. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So you've been talking about this concept of a G-torsor, some new concept of a G-torsor. And so what it is.
We're not sure how new it is, but go ahead. Yes.
Well, it's not the one I learned in school. So so the concept is something like, for example, like fix a field that we're working over. Yeah, let me just fix a field. And so then what we do is we look at the category of representations of this group, probably just to keep from worrying about various things. Let's say G is a finite group. That'll probably be good enough for me for now anyway.
Yeah, but we can say more about that, but there's more interesting to say about that, but go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, so that's what I was afraid of. Yes, that's why I wanted to be a finite group. So we'll look at the category of representations of that group over the field K. Now this kind of category here is what Jim and I sometimes call a Tworig, but I guess we could be a little more specific and call it like an absolute Tworig. So I don't want to get into this too much. Actually, this is not my main point of concern, but I'll just, for the listeners, say that this is a symmetric monoidal category enriched over vector spaces over K. The tensor product distribute. Oh, sorry, that's good so far. Symmetric monoidal enriched category enriched over the vector spaces over K, but then with a bunch of colimits, and this absolute part says that there are, roughly it says that they're like all the colimits you could ever want, and that the tensor product preserves those colimits.
I think you're using the opposite terminology from what Todd and I use.
Yeah, sorry, complete mental switcheroo. So you like to use some other fancy total? Is that what, for example?
Yeah, total probably works. I often say locally presentable to be safer, but total probably works.
Well, okay. Yeah, what I meant was locally presentable. I thought maybe there's like some super.
Yeah, there should be some nicer terminology than just locally presentable.
Yeah. So for those of you listening who know enough category theory to know about locally presentable categories, you will know that they're a convenient framework for dealing with large categories that have lots of all small colimits, but you want them to behave well despite the certain set theoretic irritations that can occur. But anyway, that is not at all what I want to talk about.
Okay.
So what's a torsor? What's a G-torsor? So a G-torsor you could talk about like a G-torsor.
So absolute is all the ones you could never not want. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Those are the ones that I want.
Right.
I don't like not getting what I want. Yeah, whatever. I like very little. So, so a G-torsor in. So we'll look at a G-torsor in another such two-rig. I'm never going to talk about any other kind of two-rig. R is, so it's a map of two rigs, of these kind of two rigs, going from representations of G to R. So it lets you turn your representations into objects of R. A map of two rigs, for those who care, should be something like a symmetric monoidal enriched functor that preserves maybe all small colimits. I think something like that.
Or something. Or yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. So, okay. So now that's fine and dandy. My ultimate goal is to figure out, like, why are we talking about this? What does this have to do with number theory, the ostensible topic to some extent of these conversations?
Right.
But
right.
before I like completely sink into that question, which is what I really want to talk about, I'll try to like to take this idea here and sort of explicate it, not explicate it, sort of unravel it and see what it amounts to, because I think that actually is relevant to the application to number theory. So there's this sort of incredibly important representation of G, which is, I guess they call it the regular representation, or the group algebra, which is just the free vector space on G itself. And the nice thing about this is that in the case we're interested in, the finite group, for example, every finite dimensional representation of G is just a co-product of co-equal of quotients of this one, which is and I guess all, I'm sticking to G being finite, all representations of G are colimits that you can build starting from this one. So if you know where this one goes under this torsor, then you know where everything in here goes.
Right.
So it's sort of like the king of representations. And
in certain
so
contexts called the generator, but maybe generator is overused. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. So it goes to something. Notice this guy is an algebra due to multiplication in G, and it's a coalgebra because k-valued functions on any finite set is a coalgebra, and they fit together perfectly and they form a Hopf algebra. So this goes to some Hopf algebra in here because two rig maps preserve all the.
Okay, I'm a little bit worried about this.
Okay.
Is this really true? Let's see. So, let's see. I'm worried about what is the, you know.
You don't want that.
well, which of this is it? The whole Hopf algebra structure that is equivariant, or is it just the coalgebra structure, or just the algebra structure, or something like that?
When you say equivariant,
yeah, I mean that it lives in this representation category. That, you know, is the co-multiplication an intertwiner?
Oh, very good point. Yeah. So right. So the multiplication is definitely okay. So Wow, okay, that's important. Yeah. So the multiplication.
Okay, yeah, but I like the way you say it's working out, because now you're saying that the co-multiplication is going to be.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I was just about to say, stop. The multiplication is not working out, right? Because multiplication, it's just for those of you who are wondering what we're talking about. Multiplication would send basis elements G and H to the pair GH. And the way that this would be a guy like KG tensor KG, and that just doesn't, that map there is not getting along with the action of G on KG tensor to KG, because I'll write here for a second, because if you act like AJ H, it's like a, probably I should write, sorry, you don't care about any of this, Jim, you just know this, but but if you but if you take,
we probably do care about this a lot, but go ahead.
well, okay. Yeah. But you don't want to see me do the calculation, but if we multiply and then act on the left by some group element, which I'll call A to make it look really different from the rest, it's really different than if we act. So the way the action works is that A would act, multiply each one of these guys separately. That's using the way that you duplicate a group element when you let it act on a tensor product of representations. And then if you multiply here, you'd get AG AH. So those aren't equal. So yeah, so the multiplication is not a morphism in multiplication.
Unless you do something tricky, like treating it as the conjugation representation instead of the regular representation or something like that.
Yeah, that's true. It is that.
But that's some other tricky game we probably don't want to worry about right now.
Good point. I mean, good point that there's not that we don't want to worry about it, but that's also a good point. But that there is that other thing. Yeah. Okay. So good. Yeah. No, actually, this is like really incredible. This actually already starts attacking some misconceptions of mine. So yes, in vector spaces, this is a Hopf algebra, but in representations of G, only the co-operations exist as morphisms there. So we'll just call this guy like a co-commutative coalgebra. That's all it is to us now. And so anyway, it gets mapped over to a co-commutative coalgebra X over in our Tworig. Okay, this is very good. Okay, now I want to start like, let's see. So okay, so here's a question already, like, to what extent, well, this is okay. So there's a question that shows up, which is like, we saw that where this one object goes determines the whole map of Tworigs. And so one natural question, if you're just like a mathematician running around looking for natural questions, is like, to what extent do you have the freedom to make this object X be any object in R whatsoever, or not?
I'm of course I'm dying to rephrase that question in certain ways, but go ahead.
So it has to, this X here, it's got to be a co-commutative coalgebra in R, which is some extra structure that it must have, which is sort of funny because I was just asking the question, like, what properties does X need to have for you to be able to to do this? That is, the fact that this thing was a co-commutative coalgebra was not, as far as I can tell, needed to determine this map of Tworigs here. You could just pick any object and you either get a functor here or you don't. So the extra structure of it being a co-commutative coalgebra only seems to manifest insofar as the question of you get the property you get a restriction that X could only be an object for which there exists a co-commutative coalgebra structure. But anyway,
I'm a little bit confused here, but I'm confused about lots of things. But go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I'm confused about this property versus structure thing. But go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I believe it's true, right? That like this map of Tworigs is completely determined by just picking an object in R, not like picking a co-commutative coalgebra object in R.
Let me think about that for a second. I mean, so what are you saying? So you're saying all right, what's the assumption? The assumption is that we just have an F here?
Yeah, so a G-torsor is a map of, it's just a map of two rates from here to here. And so I'm trying to like understand what it could be like.
Okay.
And I believe that it is, I believe that it's like we know it completely upsize morphing if we know one particular object in R, which is this X here. Is that, if I'm wrong about that?
Let me think.
So
that doesn't sound quite right to me, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, while you think, I'll give my supposed argument for it.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm saying that like rep KG is generated by means of tensor products, the symmetry and colimits from this object here.
Yes.
And tensor products, the symmetry and colimits are all preserved by this map F. So that as soon as I know what this one object gets sent to, I know what all the objects get sent to. And there's also the morphisms to contend with, but I believe that all the morphisms in rep KG, one of the fact is like every irreducible representation of G, for example, is built up by splitting idempotents that are defined on.
Oh! It sounds like you really are. So let's see. Let me think about what you're saying.
Maybe that's where my Achilles heel there, because.
But it's also your Achilles foot or something like that. Because I didn't. Okay, that makes it more plausible, but maybe that also does make it.
Well, it means that it's not just like any old object here that we get to pick, because I have to get all the morphisms in rep KG. I needed to split a bunch of idempotents here, so I had to have those idempotents here, which get sent to idempotents on X before I get all the morphisms. Before this X must have these idempotents on it for there to exist such an F. So it can't just like, well, so there's some extra structure to this X, I think.
All right, but there are some tricky questions here that I don't instantly have the answers to. So I'm struggling to follow along as you're going on. So go ahead. Luckily,
I don't need to know I think they're fun questions to think about. I hope you find them really fun. So, but they're sort of not my main question. I had no idea I was going to ask these questions when I started.
I mean, I was really expecting that we would say that the F is not just determined by the single object, rather by that single object together with some structure, some morphisms.
Yeah, well, now I see why.
Okay.
It's because I need. It's because this category is not generated purely by this object here, but by this object and a little bit more, namely, for example, this set of idempotents that this object has. I think that may be enough. Which then
it could be something like that. Yeah.
Splitting them. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about representations of finite groups, so I sort of know it. It's true that like it lets you, by splitting them, you get all the irreducible representations of G, and I guess I need to think about that. Actually,
I need to think about it too. But
I think that's not even quite true. I think what I'm saying is really going to work when G splits over the field K, so that then the only endomorphisms of those irreducibles are the ones that have to be there, which multiples of the identity. But if
that sounds plausible too. Yeah.
Yeah. Then the item then the irreducibles have these sort of their own individual personalities, which so you need to know their endomorphism.
Yes.
Division algebras to get the whole representation category. And that's actually pretty important in a way, because we're sort of, well, I'm very slowly creeping up to it. I think we're especially interested in the case when the group doesn't split over K. That's
okay.
We're especially interested in phenomena that occur from the fact that our field K is not yet algebraically complete. Okay. So anyway,
I don't necessarily want to completely hijack the discussion right now, but I just want to say that, I was thinking it the other way. I was taking for granted that we're going to have this generating object, but that it's going to be equipped with some extra structure. And I have some particular ideas about what that extra structure is, which I think would be interesting to say, but I'll wait to say about that until you want me to say something.
I do want to hear that.
Okay.
One thing, by the way, is sort of yeah, okay, fine. Yeah. I do, yeah, I mean, I was just like diving in there and trying to think of what extra structure this had without actually like thinking hard about what we're doing here with G-torsor. So obviously it would be sort of beneficial to like think more about about the overall setup to like see what structure this thing is supposed to have. I mean, this thing is supposed to be like KG as much as it can when it's just an object in a general Tworig. I guess that's sort of what you expect it to be like. But yeah. Anyway, okay, I would like to come back to that, but I want to probably keep marching on, because so I think, for example, that since we're interested in I'm interested in class field theory and Artin reciprocity and stuff like that. Yes. I think at least for now, I'm especially interested in the case when G is abelian.
That seems very reasonable.
So,
I mean, one reason is because we suspect that certain things are going to be relatively easy when it's abelian, and not easy when it's non-abelian. So that's a good justification.
So one thing about that, by the way, which you know too well, but so when G is abelian, while it's very nice because it allows you to do Fourier analysis or Pontryagin duality analysis on this group algebra, it's also like a great way to get confused, because this thing really is a Hopf algebra, actually. Sorry, it's a Hopf algebra in Vect. Okay,
right.
And so it'll always have a dual Hopf algebra, but when I hope this is right, yeah, when G is abelian, then that will be isomorphic to its dual. I'm doing the finite case here.
Yes, I think that all sounds right.
So,
I mean, sometimes I talk about, something like Hopf duels versus Fourier duels, and it sounds like you're sort of talking about a situation where those are the same thing or something like that.
Yeah. So I think these will be isomorphic as Hopf algebras in Vect K. And in that case, and part of why that's so confusing is because the co-multiplication of one of them becomes the multiplication of the other one, and vice versa. And so, like here, I was like tripping over this fact. I was saying,
actually, there's some tricky things here already. What?
You think that's false when like K is not algebraically complete?
I think that might be right.
That's true. Yeah.
And
Wait,
let me see what you're saying. G is abelian.
I think.
Okay. First of all, I think I'm just having a lot of terminology, notation issues here, and maybe terminology issues. But also, right. I mean, actually, I'm going back to where you started out saying G is a finite group, and
Yeah,
I'm just what?
Yeah, I always wanted to be finite for now.
Yeah, but I have to really think about that mainly because somebody just showed me Milne's semi-recent book on, I don't know, algebraic groups or something like that. And there's like I just got a brief look at the table of contents, and it looked like there was a section on finite algebraic groups or something like that. And those were, I think he meant something a lot different from finite groups, in which I think he meant, algebraic groups, which are sort of very small. I think that's what he meant, but it sounds like that's not what you mean. Well, I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, I definitely don't mean. Well, I'm not talking about algebraic groups at all. Yeah.
Okay. Then let me ask you about an example here. Okay. To see see how well I understand what you're saying here. So let's specialize to the case where G is, for example, Z mod 3. And if you don't like that example, we can do a different example. But let's try Z mod 3.
That's fine.
Okay. So now you're talking about K adjoin G, and that is that's a
three-dimensional vector space for starters. Just K plus K plus K. It's the group out. This is what I mean by the group algebra.
Right, and its representations will just be actions, vector space, right. I mean, let's see, the modules of this, now I have to think about modules versus co-modules. Let's see. So,
well, the modules of this, well, okay. If I think of this as the group algebra of Z mod 3, the modules of that algebra are the same as the representations of the group Z mod 3. I mean, that's okay,
but I just noticed one of the things that's,
you may not want to think about algebras because we were more interested in co-algebras or something.
Well, something like that. But I mean, there are traps here. I'm just trying to state one of the traps out loud.
Yep.
For the intended purpose of not falling into the trap. Of course, sometimes it works the other way around. Sometimes by stating it out loud, I manage to fall into the trap. But so when I think of a Hopf algebra, see, even if we're just talking about finite groups, which are not really algebraic groups yet, I'm still thinking of them as algebraic groups. And that's really connected with the fact that they're finite. In other words, if these were, regular old ordinary groups, but if they were not finite, then I wouldn't know a good way to make them into algebraic groups. I'm really taking advantage of the finiteness in order to make them into algebraic groups, because I'm making them to algebraic groups, which I think of as commutative Hopf algebras. And I think of them as commutative Hopf algebras. And when I do it that way, the representations become co-modules of that commutative Hopf algebra.
You're thinking of Z mod 3 as what? You're thinking of it as F,
I'm thinking of it, yeah, I would be thinking of it as the functions on the 3-element set, or the arbitrary k-valued functions on Z mod 3. And that would be a commutative Hopf algebra. Well, I mean, one thing you're absolutely right about, right, is the fact that the abelianness makes things, it sounds like it's going to make things easier, but it makes things a lot harder in a ways, because you can't tell when you're making a mistake.
Yeah.
So see, if you hand me a finite group, what I'm really tempted to do with it is treat it as an algebraic group by having the functions on it, the k-valued function on it, form a commutative ring, form a commutative K algebra.
Does that make it an algebraic group?
Well, like I say, it will only work if, let's see, is that going to work? Are you trying to tell me do I need to worry about K as algebraically closed or something like that? I mean, I think, the arbitrary operations on this finite set, including like the group operations and things like that, those are going to be, homomorphisms in this commutative ring picture.
Oh, okay.
And in that way, I'm going to get
like
it
a zero-dimensional variety.
Exactly. And you can sort of see there why it really needs G to be finite. And you'll end up with a commutative algebraic group. Whereas, when you're talking about the representations as modules, when you were thinking of the representations of G as modules of K adjoin G, that's this formally-ish dual picture where you're talking about co-commutative Hopf algebras, if G is not necessarily abelian. So there's all this Hopf duality to disentangle if we really want to avoid getting ourselves into too much trouble, falling into various traps here. So I think I can almost tell which way. Well, let's see. I have to think about this. Let's see. I mean, it could be that in the abelian case, we can both get our way or something like that. Is that right? I mean, like, let's see that the.
Well, that's the claim of this isomorphism.
Well, but it's still tricky there's still something tricky about this in the case where K is not algebraically closed. So like, yeah, could we think about it with K being the reals or K being the rationals and G being Z mod 3. And so, I mean, right, there's a sort of very straightforward, pure linear algebra way just to dualize a Hopf algebra in this context, dualize a bicommutative Hopf algebra in this context. And so what am I trying to say here? That so first of all, were you trying to say that there was were you trying to write down a natural equivalence or just an?
No, well,
I mean, were you at all tempted to say?
Well, I don't know how natural it is, but
were you tempted to put, like, instead of, on the G inside the brackets, did you want to put like a Pontryagin dual hat or something like that?
That would perhaps be wise to do. I was
I mean, let me think about what you're saying. Okay, maybe you're not trying to say something natural. Let me think about what you're saying. KG. See, I mean, one of the things you might be saying here is you might just be saying that those are isomorphic as Hopf algebras. Let's see, I'm confused. Let me think.
I'm saying they're isomorphic as Hopf algebras in the category of vector spaces, not as Hopf algebras in the category of representations of G. That
Right. But let me think what you're saying. There's still something confusing here. Let me think. Z mod 3. So, okay, so in particular, yes, okay, so you're putting that star is supposed to mean this, linear algebra dual of bicommutative Hopf algebras. That's the thing that you're talking about there.
Yep, you take the dual vector space and in the finite dimensional case, that lets you turn the operations on your Hopf algebra.
Okay, but again, I think that this is not true in the case where K is like the reals or the rationals and where G is Z mod 3. And I think what will happen is, okay, so you've got G being Z mod 3. But if you take the dual thing, it will be, I want to say it's something that could be like the cube roots of unity instead of Z mod 3. So what am I trying to say? There's this algebra, what am I trying to say? There's this algebraic group, which is the cube roots of unity. And that's different from the algebraic group Z mod 3. And they are different, but their Hopf algebras are dual to each other, I think, as Hopf algebras, as bicommutative Hopf algebras.
What's the algebraic group of cube roots of unity when you take your field to be, say, R?
What is it like as an algebraic group?
Yep.
Do
you really mean like you take the equation x cubed equals 1 and you require, we're working in the reals, so that it just has one solution?
It just has one solution, but it has, that's not all it has. It has these local solutions or partial solutions or something like that. Yeah, so what are we trying to say here? So, I mean, this is a great example to work out.
Yeah, this isn't at all what I wanted to say.
but I think the statement
I know it's
true
really important
the way you wrote it. Say it again?
Yeah, I know it's really important because, well, we've been talking about this type of issue a lot. So
Yes. I mean, there's enough trickiness going on here that I'm still worried I'm not saying things correctly. Maybe this is an isomorphism that you're talking about, an unnatural isomorphism or something like that. Let's see. So you're saying, yeah?
I just thought that whenever you have a finite dimensional, yeah.
I mean, one thing that's true, am I saying this right? Every finite abelian group, and again, we don't mean algebraic group, but just an actual finite abelian group, is unnaturally isomorphic to its own Pontryagin dual? Is that what it's called? Pontryagin dual?
Yep.
That's true.
Yeah, and that has nothing to do with any choice of field. That's just a. That's just
right. But I don't think the thing that you wrote down is true. And I ought to be able to say more clearly what, you just look at this Z mod 3 example and you see that it's not true. What am I trying to say? So you've got.
I still don't understand how are you planning to define
the roots of unity?
Well,
as an algebraic variety, as you said, x cubed equals 1. That's an algebraic variety.
That has one point. Varieties have points, right?
Oh, well, then maybe you don't call it. Maybe you don't call them varieties. Maybe you call them schemes or something like that.
Okay, as a scheme,
an affine scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's the affine scheme defined by that ideal, the ideal generated by that polynomial. You even have to be careful about the versus here again, because what am I trying to say? I mean, it's like, because of the Hopf duality. So what am I trying to say? I mean, right. I mean, if you take K adjoin Z mod 3, I mean, yeah, those two things that you wrote down are exactly the same thing, if I understand the notation. Those are descriptions of commutative rings that are exactly the same.
Okay.
Right? Right? Isn't that manifest? That that's what it says, right?
Well, you gotten me so demoralized. I was starting to worry about that. But you're right.
Yes.
This is a vector space with three guys. And I will call the second one tendentiously. I'll call it BX. I'll call the CX squared, where A, B, and C are in our field here. And I'm just using this 1 and X squared to be names of the elements of Z mod 3. But that's supposed to make it evident that it's isomorphic to this guy here, as algebra say.
Right. So yes, these will be the same commutative ring. Yes, these will be the same commutative ring. And they're so that means they have dual Hopf algebras.
What do you mean they'll have dual?
Sorry, they have dual coalgebras. I meant,
Okay. Yep.
There are these dual coalgebras, and what am I trying to say? That
I think I want to pause this discussion. So because there's like there's a clear question now, which is like, so they're isomorphic as commutative algebras, and that makes them, and you can make them, sorry, you're not gonna like this, but you can make them into Hopf algebras.
Yes.
And then then there's like a question, like, well, it's the same question we've been talking about before, but there's this dual Hopf algebra. And you're asking, is that dual Hopf algebra isomorphic to this one?
Right. And if I understand correctly, that is false. I mean, in other words, what I'm saying is these two things are isomorphic as Hopf algebras. They're not isomorphic to each other's duals, and neither is. Yeah. I mean, there's also the possibility that you could ask whatever questions you want to ask without, we could try to somehow bypass all this confusion.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I said. I just said, like, here's a question.
Okay.
That either one of us could figure out the answer to, because it's a finite sized question, finitary question. If it's not too big, and let's not do it now.
Okay. So we're just putting this aside as an unresolved question for now. Okay, let's try to do that. Let's try to do that.
I mean, it was worthwhile though we got to that point, but I don't want to.
Sure. Okay. Sorry, maybe I didn't understand that what you were suggesting to do that. Okay, go ahead.
I just like remembering it. So, okay. Now my real question is, like, what the hell are we doing all this stuff for? So, but that's like I don't want to give you such an open opportunity.
Yes.
So, right. So, okay, so I've narrowed down to the case where G is abelian, and then we discover I'm already confused in that case.
Right.
And then I believe that I want to narrow down to the case. Can we narrow down to the case where this Tworig R is vector spaces over the same field K? Like, for example, K.
Yes, we can narrow that down and get something interesting. Yes,
without destroying without destroying the interest. Okay,
yes.
So, sorry, I'm on a new page, so you can't tell what I'm talking about anymore, but I'll do that anyway. Okay, so what we're doing is we're considering these G-torsors now, just to remind me what was on the other page. So they're going from representations over this field K. Think of it like the rationals or something. This finite abelian group. Okay, now, sorry, I wasn't supposed to be saying consider. It's a command. So okay, now my big question is, these are supposed to have something or other to do with extensions of the field K, whose Galois group over K is G.
Yes.
So how are these related to field extensions? I guess since different size K's sound the same, go L over K, where the Galois group is, I'm going to say is equal to this G here, our finite abelian group. Now,
yes.
So okay, well, that's my question, but before I even let you answer it.
Yes.
So I mean, there's some obvious things. So one obvious thing is that you can think of L as being, an object in vect K. That's one relationship. And
wait a minute, what's the obvious thing? I mean, I agree, it's from certain viewpoints, it's sort of obvious, but how are you saying it's obvious?
Well, when you have a field extension of another field, big field's a vector space over the.
Oh, and you're saying that because the Galois group is that means that G is acting, and that
Well,
means...
even yeah, well, and I wasn't even before, I hadn't even got to that. I was just saying that L is a vector space over the field. Okay.
Okay. Maybe I missed what you were saying. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's why I said obvious, because yeah, that was the boring part. But then so the more interesting part is that indeed G is acting on L.
Yes.
So L becomes a representation of G. So I mean, so we can think of it. So we can, if we want, we can think of L as being in representations. We can think of it as representations of K of G. Actually, that was over here. Actually, so actually.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a little, I'm confusing myself even more. So I thought we were trying to trying to do something like, well, for maybe like get a field extension with Galois group G from a G-torsor, or maybe get a G, or maybe the other way around.
Something like that, yes.
And so that's what I want to know. And so hope you see like why I'm getting confused right now, which is like right now it seems like what this field extension most of all is it's actually just an object in here.
Right, yes, okay.
There may be some dual.
Yeah, there are possibly all sorts of tricky things going on here, but we want to find something relatively non-tricky and conceptual.
Right. Yeah. So if you want to, I'd be happy to let you take over now, as long as I could force you to keep answering this question in like the simplest way that's like in alignment with what your overall goal.
Well, there's a lot of things to say here, and I'm not sure how organized I am.
That I can understand easily.
Well, okay, all right. Let me try to think about this. So, all right. Let me try an approach here. I don't know if this is the super best approach, but let me try an approach here because it might work.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so let's recall how we were thinking about I mean, so for example, at first we thought about the group ring of this finite group G. We were thinking of it as being well, you can think of it as being a Hopf algebra. See, maybe okay, right? Maybe what I really do want to say maybe I really do want to try to talk about the function rings of these groups rather than the group rings.
Okay.
And right. So the group ring is this of a finite group is this thing that you can make into a co-commutative Hopf algebra. That's not what I want. So I really want to think about the function ring, which you can make into a commutative Hopf algebra.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a finite group G, and we have the commutative Hopf algebra given by the function ring on it. And functions valued in what? Well, presumably it's some relatively anonymous field K, which maybe we'll think about in more detail later. But okay. And we've got this function ring, commutative Hopf algebra. And we can also think of that function ring Oh boy, that we can think of that function ring as a representation of G.
Mhm.
You can think of that function ring as a representation of G, but except that we're not quite sure whether it's being a Hopf or to what extent does its Hopf structure live inside this representation category.
Mhm.
And boy, there's so many duality confusions here. So, I mean, so how is this going to work? So maybe now I'm saying that right, maybe in this picture it's the commutative ring structure that does live in, is equivariant, that it does live in the representation category, whereas it's the co-multiplication that really doesn't live in there.
Yep. Yeah, it's the other way around now. Yep.
Okay. So I think that's the way I want to think of it.
Okay.
But then we were commenting on the fact that there are these other tricks you can play, which is like you can take the, don't think of it as a representation by the regular representation. Think of it as a representation by the conjugation representation. And in that case, it really does live as a commutative Hopf algebra in the representation category.
Yep.
But and there are good reasons to study that, but it's not very related to what we're trying to understand at the moment, at least not that I can think of at the moment.
Okay.
But on the other hand, there's a somewhat similar trick, but maybe even more simple-minded trick that it really is relevant here, I think, which is that you can also, never mind the conjugation representation, you can think of it as the trivial representation.
True.
And so think of it that way. Let's see, maybe I should try to be able to write on the board here. Let's see.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, either that or I should be like taking notes on the board, but you should probably.
So yeah, so let me try to move things around so I can write on the board, if I can figure out how to do it here. How do I do this? Make it full screen. Move this thing down here. Full screen. I was doing something funny, but okay. And then can you go to a new page here? Okay. And so what am I trying to say here? That you've got, so first of all, okay, you've been notating this group ring as K adjoin G, and that's a good notation for the group ring. But how do I notate the function ring? Maybe it's like,
well, usually write K to the G.
Right. So
I don't know if I'm seeing you. I think you're like you're writing on some. Oh, there you are. Okay, good.
Yeah. I just used the wrong thing at first, but now I think it's okay.
Okay. That looks like the beginning of a K.
I can't remember whether it was going to be the beginning of. Let's see.
I was hoping you were going to write K to the G, but I don't know.
Let's see, fit to window. Maybe that. Oh, fit to window. Well, anyway, let's see. So, yes, that's right. That is what I was going to say. K to the G. Right. Okay. So that's this function ring. And right. So on this function ring, the multiplication of functions really is equivariant, whereas the co-multiplication is not equivariant. But except that, right, if you make it a trivial representation, then like everything is equivariant.
Right. True.
but we're going to exploit something like that here. So what am I trying to say here? That we're going to think of it as, so which way does the co-multiplication point here? It goes like that. Okay, so think of this as, you know, the sort of tautological representation, the sensible representation, that G is acting on functions by, you know, acting on the inputs of the functions, right? You know what I mean?
I thought you were going to make it into the trivial representation.
That's what I'm going to do over here. This one's going to be the trivial.
Oh, okay.
But these two are going to be the sensible thing.
Okay, so that is the map. That is a map in rep G.
I think that's right. And this is sort of the key thing. This was, you know, this was my answer to the question of what is this extra structure on this regular representation that is precisely the thing that gets, you know, preserved by the, in other words,
Now,
yeah, go ahead.
okay, the regular representation is there are two KGs running around here. When you say the
Right,
regular,
maybe I should say regular and regular.
okay. So the regular representation has this structure of acting on its doppelganger trivial representation.
Isn't it more like, am I saying this right? It has the structure of being acted on by the trivial one.
Oh, sorry. It's, first of all, it's co-acted.
Yes, that's right. Geometrically, right.
Yeah, okay. Right. Wow, I was really confused, and so are you. Yeah, okay.
Well, yeah. I don't think I was that confused. I was just saying.
No, you're not as
funny
confused as I am, but you were
okay.
the wrong thing. Okay, so it's co-acted on by the trivial representation. We've got a right coaction here just for fun, but yeah, okay, it's fine.
Yes, yes, it is co-acted on by the trivial representation. In other words, there's the, you know, the trivial representation is this external group G. And
yeah, that one, just to warn our readers, that guy sort of lives in, there's a version of that guy that lives in every Tworig, actually, yeah. Because you can just take direct sums of copies of the unit object and make it into this, take G copies of the unit object, sum them up. That becomes like it's like a hop. You can give it all the structure you want. So you can make it into a hop algebra. It's like the,
yeah, I'm tempted to say that this is, I mean, haven't we called this before something like this is a categorified version of just like importing any external scalars you want and thinking of them as, you know, scalars in some ring that you're presenting.
mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
you know, so what makes, what is special about this regular representation when you know, when you use it as a generator and send it to some other thing? Well, so it right, it always gets sent to a thing that is acted on or co-acted on by this external G. And, but that's still not the complete answer to, you know, I think that's the complete answer at the structure level, but there's still a little bit more at the property level.
I see. Yeah, this is where the word torsor actually kicks in, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
It has to be acted on, but in a way that makes it look
right. And
not too big and not too small, just like G.
That's exactly. That's exactly right. And right. And roughly speaking, I'm you know, there's a couple of things here that I don't quite understand, but roughly speaking, we want to say that this action, this this algebraic coaction, which we can reinterpret as a geometric action. We want to say, roughly speaking, that it's invertible. Right, that acting by an element, am I saying this right? What am I trying to say? That acting by an element is, no, being acted on by an element is invertible or something like that. Is that right? What am I saying? Right, I mean, that's a big part of the idea of a torsor, right? That the action is sort of invertible in what? So the action is, which input is the action invertible in it, but in the actor or in the acted upon?
So the way I think about it,
maybe it's both of them. Oh, I guess it's both. I guess it's both of them. But for an action, it's just invertible in the acted upon. An action of a group, right? Because elements of a group are invertible. So an action of a group always has the property that action is invertible in the input that is the acted upon. but the extra property of a torsor, or one of the key extra properties of a torsor, is that it's also invertible in the other input, which is the actor. Did I say that right?
I think you said it backwards, but
well,
the way I think about it is that a torsor is a space that's acted upon by a group, but then I can take two of the guys that are acted upon and divide them and get a group element. Right. So I'm inverting the acted upon guy if I think of it that way, which I think is the opposite of what you said.
I think we're disagreeing about what inverted in means or something like that. But I think we're agreeing conceptually. So let's just try to stick with that for the moment. Okay. So and then there's but then there's still there's still an annoying thing that I don't understand there, that isn't quite sufficient to be a torsor. Right. Because but nevertheless, we're on the right track. And this is really related to how the representations end up being the walking example of a torsor. Right? I mean, that's, we should say that out loud, right? But what we're saying is the representation category is the walking, the representation category of G is the walking G torsor, when you do it the right way.
Just for my imagined audience, what he's saying is that you could take R to just be rep KG and take this to be the identity, and that would be the simplest example of a G torsor, and that's the walking G torsor. Yep.
And moreover, that all the other examples of G torsors are just shadows or reflections or whatever you call them, shadows of that generic one.
Yep. Because they all factor through it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's glitches in my understanding of that, but nevertheless, that's the basic idea that we're trying to understand here. So yes, in the case of understanding all of this for an abstract group, what do I mean by abstract? An unknown, anonymous group G. We want to get it to the point where it will work for any group G. That's the general way to get this idea to work. That the representation category of G, properly construed, and to me, properly construed has something to do with being the comodules of a commutative Hopf algebra or something like that. But anyway, the idea is that the representation category of G is the walking G torsor when you squint at things in the right way, and that's kind of and that's very general for a very general class of groups G. It's not so general that it includes the arbitrary groups G, but it at least includes the finite groups G. There may be something there are some things you can do for the arbitrary groups G, but for the finite groups G and for the algebraic groups G, it works really nice. Oh, and also when you think about it, I mean, because it works for the finite ones and because of some abstract nonsense, it also works very nicely for the profinite ones. And that's also very important in this class field theory and Galois theory and stuff like that.
Can you just say some stuff about where the Galois group of a field shows up in this game? That is, like, you're gonna say something like, I hope you're gonna say something like, when you have an extension of our original field whose Galois group is G, then you get a G-torsor.
Yeah, let me think. So what am I trying to say? So let me try to do something like that, but let me try to apply what I've been saying about, you know, how the representation category properly construed is the walking G-torsor. So what am I trying to say here? All right, so you're asking about, well, let's say G is finite abelian. You know, maybe I'm just repeating stuff you've already said, but G is finite abelian, and we have okay, maybe I should go back to your page. So what do I have control over the page turning here?
Maybe not, I don't know.
Maybe I do. Okay, so you're saying, how are these related to field extensions of that kind? Right. So what am I trying to say here? So right. So maybe we want to start out with such a field extension and get from that one of these G-torsors.
Sounds great. Yep.
And the other direction will be the other direction doesn't quite exist, but it, because I mean, right there, these I mean, roughly speaking, because, you know, a trivial G-torsor, you know, like a trivial bundle, right? That's not like a field extension. That's more just like a product of fields or something like that. So, you know, for the general thing, you have to consider not just field extension, not just fields, but finite products of fields or something like that. But let's see. So, all right. So how is this going to work? So, yeah, okay. It's taking me a long time to say this, but I think I'm actually saying it correctly now. So the answer is simply evaluate F. Evaluate F at this generator. And that will
make some, yeah, so okay. So just to be super clear,
I think we should be on the page where, yeah,
the generator is really it really is the regular representation.
That's right. That's because that's what I thought I heard you say, that the generator, right? The generator is the regular.
That's what I thought, but that was before. That was before a bunch of right similar sounding things and appeared, like the difference between the group algebra and the function algebra, and the difference between
yes, but it's going to
as the regular representation, algebra is the trivial representation. So it's like,
Oh, so, oh, that's what you were pointing at. Okay, I didn't,
Well,
you were flipping the pages so fast, I was getting confused by the.
I'm pointing at numerous things,
Yes,
but the, okay, the generator is the,
the generator is the regular representation, but that generator is acted on by this trivial representation, this external thing.
okay,
Or, yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
okay,
algebraically, there's this coaction, but geometrically, it's this action.
okay,
It's this action of the external thing upon the regular representation.
okay. So you're gonna take that guy, that generator, and you're gonna zap it over here, and you're gonna get
the external thing, the external G acting on, F of that generator.
oh,
And that's
okay,
the answer to your question, basically.
okay. Which is sort of,
It's actually a good answer. It just annoying. It took me so long to say that, but yes, go ahead.
it's okay. So it's related to what I was saying, which is like, hey, the most obvious thing is that L is a vector space that's acted on by G. but you're not wanting to think of it as an object in rep KG. You're wanting to think of it as as an object in vect K.
Yeah. Or even just think of it as a group, as a finite group. This that is acting on. You can this property that you can express of what it is the walking example of. It's the walking example of being acted upon. Yeah.
I was talking about L here, our fixed field extension. So
yeah.
It's not the walking anything. It's well, everything's the walking.
It's the foot of the walking thing. I mean, it's the
It's the Achilles heel of the...
yeah, something like it's
okay. Okay, anyway, but I know everyone is confused except you and me, no doubt. But
right.
We're gonna. So from this field extension, you do get a specific. Well, you were wanting to you're saying that not every F gives you a field extension, but when you have a field extension, you get a particular Tworig map. Which
yeah, I mean, can we call the general thing
to this guy L in here?
There are these fields, which are these simple commutative algebras, but we want these semi-simple commutative algebras.
In general.
Yeah.
For a general G-torsor.
That's right. So the ones where it really is a field are the ones where it's sort of maximally twisted. The torsor is maximally twisted so that it doesn't, split into any. The semi-simple thing is actually just simple.
And it seems like, let's see. Does this stuff that we're talking about right now?
Yeah.
This seems to work even when G is not abelian, right? Or am I screwing up?
That I think yes, everything we're talking about should work in the case where it's non-abelian, and thus you should see that whole picture that we just described. You should see it more clearly in the non-abelian case because the abelian coincidences don't interfere.
Yeah, right. It's very good to do the non-abelian case when you can, so you don't get so
yes,
right,
and I think I'm claiming that if you do the non-abelian case, you'll see why we wanted to choose the function ring rather than the group ring,
right,
and things like that.
Yeah. So this has managed to eat up a lot of our allotted time. Since we started late, if you want, we can go on.
Yeah, it is sort of very tempting to quit or almost quit right now. Well, so first of all, we do sort of feel that it took us a ridiculous long time, that we did sort of address your question.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So maybe instead of saying stuff right now, maybe I should just sort of think out loud about stuff that I want to talk about or something like that. Because there's a lot of really interesting stuff to talk about. But let's see, we're also gonna have a break coming up next week. Well, one thing that might mean is that I really have been meaning to sort of write you some emails where I try to put some stuff that we've been talking about. I mean, maybe this 1 week break that we're going to have will give me some time to do that. So, but is there anything I want to say about that? Let me just. I mean, right, there's also, okay. One thing we could do is we could turn off the recording right now. I could think for a minute, and then we could turn it back on. And then at that point we could say, okay, we've finished for today. Or maybe I'll have some closing thoughts or something like that. Or maybe I won't, but let's just turn off the recording for now. And then possibly I'll come back with some closing thoughts, okay?
Okay, yeah, so Jim decided he didn't want to say anything more. I just wanted to say that on Monday, I'm giving a talk about symmetric spaces and the tenfold way. And over the last couple of weeks, I've been using this talk to as a go to finally really figure out what was going on better. So sometime I'd like to tell you, Jim, about that.
Yeah, I'm very interested to hear about that. But sorry, did you just say that you do have a talk coming up?
Yeah, I have a talk on Monday that I'm going to give
on Monday. So
that'll be hopefully recorded. You could either go to it or you could listen to the recording. But as
I guess I can get the details just from your webpage or something like that.
Yeah. So as usual, if I tell you about it personally, it'll come across differently.
Sure. Okay, but this coming Monday. Okay, good.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of category theory in there, which in my talk I'm sort of pushing back to the end, but it's actually sort of the main point in another way. So it's very nice that it all finally fit together. Yeah, I was working on it for a long time. Okay, so I will see you, I guess, the week after next.
Okay, thanks a lot. I'll see you.
Yep. Bye.
Okay, I'll